Hello, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, which is titled The Fight for Permanent Closure, Panamanians Address Renewed Efforts to Reopen a Canadian Copper Mine. My name is Paulina Personius, and I coordinate campaigns focused on mining and the energy transition in the Latin American region for Earthworks. Earthworks is an organization that is based in the US. We work with communities impacted by oil and gas and mining projects. Together with frontline communities, we fight for clean air, water and land, healthy communities, and for corporate accountability. We work towards solutions that protect the Earth's resources, our climate, and our communities. Today's webinar is being co-hosted with Viviana Herrera, who is the Latin American Program Coordinator for Mining Watch Canada. Mining Watch works in solidarity with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities who are dealing with potential or actual mining operations that affect their lives and territories, or with the legacy of closed mines. They also work with mine workers who seek safe working conditions and fair treatment. We also want to thank some of our endorsers and organizations that have supported this webinar, in particular, America's Policy Group, Common Frontiers, and Panama Vale Más Sin Minería. We have an incredible panel today that represents different perspectives from Panamanian civil society that my co-host will introduce as they are about to speak. But I just wanted to say that we are so grateful to them for taking the time to be here and for sharing their thoughts and expertise with us. I also just want to make a quick note that at the end of today's panel, we will have time to answer a few questions. So please use the Q&A box that you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen to leave any questions that you might have for the panelists. And I just wanted to briefly say a few words to contextualize this webinar. Some of you may have followed news reports in late 2023 of massive nationwide protests in Panama over the Cobre Panama copper mine, which is owned by the Canadian mining company First Quantum Minerals. For 39 days, Panamanians took to the streets to protest the renewal of the mine's concession contract and the impacts of mining on the country overall. But what brought a historic number of people out to the streets in that particular moment? First Quantum had been operating in legal limbo in the country since its original contract was ruled unconstitutional in 2017 by the Panamanian Supreme Court. Since then, and up to the 2023 protests, the company continued operating without a legally required contract. When news broke that the government was renegotiating another contract with the company, despite the legal and environmental issues that had plagued the project, people took to the streets to show that Panama is worth more without mining. Faced with such strong opposition to the project, the government declared a moratorium on new mining concession applications currently under review, and expired concessions. Soon after, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that First Quantum's latest contract was unconstitutional, having violated 25 articles of the Panamanian Constitution. With its contract nullified for a second time and such impressive citizen momentum to protest the mine, First Quantum was forced to suspend operations at Cobre Panama. As Panamanians, civil society organizations, and their international allies celebrated these huge legal victories that advanced their goal of protecting communities and the environment from the destructive impacts of mining, First Quantum began threatening to sue Panama in international arbitration for 20 billion USD, a figure which represented about 25% of the country's total GDP when this began in 2023. ISDS, or Investor State Dispute Settlement, is a form of international arbitration that is often upheld in bi- or multilateral trade agreements. It tends to have a chilling effect on governments trying to pass or implement environmental regulations or respect community and Indigenous rights. It has been denounced by United Nations experts who warn that ISDS can prevent states from addressing climate change or upholding their international human rights obligations. First Quantum's corporate policies and environment sustainability and governance reporting often discuss the need to engage with communities and provide them with opportunities for employment and community development through company-led programs. While First Quantum claims that the mine is key for Panama's economy, It has also pitched the mine as critical for the energy transition and has appealed to the Trump administration, claiming that it could be an important source of copper for the United States. First Quantum has also continued to push a narrative that the problem is not the environmental and social issues stemming from the mine, but a lack of understanding on the part of the Panamanian people. In a recent February quarterly earnings call, First Quantum CEO Tristan Pascal stated that we continue on our public outreach programs to educate the Panamanian public about the benefits of Cobre Panama and that mining of natural resources in an environmentally and socially responsible manner is a necessity for the country in our modern lives. This completely disregards all of the work that Panamanian groups, such as the Environmental Advocacy Center, who are on our panel today, have done to gather documentation from First Quantum and the Panamanian government on the impacts of the mine and have it independently analyzed. The work that independent media, such as Radio Temblor, has done to disseminate the information to the broader public in a transparent and accessible way. Someone who is from that media outlet, Olmedo Carrasquilla, was supposed to be here today, but was unable to come at the last minute. He actually went to cover a protest today, and they were met with repression from police forces. So he was unable to make it to a place where he could connect for this webinar. It also ignores the work that community groups such as Los Guerreros del Mar, who are also on our panel today, have done to document the environmental impacts of the mine in their communities and territories, often at great risk to their personal security. And the work of organizations such as Fundicep, another one of our panelists, who have coordinated protests and strikes in other parts of the country in support of their fellow citizens in Colón, where the mine is located, all while being criminalized by their own government for exercising their right to peacefully protest. Time and time again, First Quantum has publicly affirmed its commitment to an open and transparent dialogue about the Cobre Panama mine. But notably absent is a commitment to uphold communities and the country's right to decide for themselves if mining is in their best interest or if it represents the type of community development that they want. In spite of a lack of public support for the mine, concerns and even sanctions related to the environmental impacts of the mine, legal problems with the contract for a second time, a moratorium that prevents the company from attaining a new contract, and the critiques of the ISDS system, First Quantum still chose to seek billions from the Panamanian state, a seeming attempt to make their legal and environmental negligence Panama's financial responsibility. In 2024, Panama elected a new president, who has since stated that he is willing to negotiate the reopening of the mine. He has also discussed the idea of reopening to close the mine, without a clear explanation of how this would work or why the mine must be reopened for the closure process. With rumors circulating about a potential reopening, there have already been protests as civil society makes it clear that they still believe Panama is worth more without mining. Just last month, the president introduced an idea of a partnership between the Panamanian government and First Quantum to operate the mine. Members of the National Assembly, unions, community members, and civil society organizations have spoken out in rejection of this idea, in large part because it ignores calls for a definitive closure. Throughout this whole process, neither the president nor First Quantum have explained how this reopening would differ from past operations. At the end of last year, the Environmental Law Alliance, or ELAW, published a report identifying issues with the stability of the tailings or mine waste facility that they classified as a very serious and immediate concern. They also identified a lack of adequate water monitoring, which has triggered acid mine drainage at the mine site. Communities that have already been living with the environmental impacts of contaminated water sources and impacts to the region's biodiversity levels have still not received a clear answer about how these issues will be addressed and amended. A closure process that aims to mitigate any potential environmental and social harms must be planned out and clearly communicated from the beginning of a project in a reiterative manner. Frontline communities who have to deal with the impacts left behind by a mining project and the waste it generates in perpetuity must be consulted about what they want to see out of a closure process and what a safe closure looks like for them. Tomorrow is First Quantum's annual general meeting for investors and shareholders, a space that lacks community voices and perspectives. So today we have the opportunity to hear from community and social movement leaders from Panama about how they view closure and what their demands are for their government and First Quantum. I am so excited to welcome them and again appreciate your attendance at this webinar. With that, I will hand it over to my co-host, Viviana.
Thank you so much, Paulina. I'm very, very happy to be here. My name is Viviana Herrera, and I'm the Latin American Program Coordinator at Mining Watch Canada. I will be introducing each of our speakers before their presentations. The presenters will speak for about 8 minutes, and we are going to let you know when your time is almost up. After all the presentations, I'll share a call to action and moderate the Q&A session. So let's start this. First, we have Joanna Abrego. Joanna is the legal manager at the Environmental Advocacy Center, better known as SIAM, a non-governmental organization dedicated to the legal defense of the environment in Panama, and a member of Panama vale más sin minería. Panama is worth more without mining. She served as head of legal advice and as an advisor to the Ministry of the Environment, an entity she helped formalize. She holds advanced degrees with honors, including a bachelor's degree in law and political science from the University of Panama, and a master's degree in international legal studies with a specialization in international environmental law from American University, which she completed as a Fulbright scholar. Joanna, your organization has for many years been documenting the environmental and human rights impacts of Cobre Panama. You have denounced also the impacts of international arbitration and the possible reopening of the mine. I would like to ask you, what are the specific concerns about how the Canadian company is using international arbitration to pressure Panama to reopen the mine, and what will this mean for Panamanians? We've also heard that the government has been talking about a possible public-private partnership as a vehicle for reactivating the mine. How are SIAM and Panama vale más sin minería responding to this, and what are some of the efforts led by civil society organizations like yours to advocate and lobby for the safe and immediate closure of the mine? Joanna.
Muchísimas gracias, Viviana. Muchas gracias a Earthworks y a Mining Watch por...
Thank you, Mining Works and Earthworks, for inviting us. Thanks for your time. We wanted to help you understand a bit better the reality that we're living through in Panama. So I would say that it's important to understand that Panama is facing 5 different arbitration cases. One with First Quantum, as we said, for $20 million for the infraction of the arbitration clause in the contract between Panama and the company in 2023, and it was later declared unconstitutional. In addition, there are 4 arbitrations in course that are investment related. Once again, there's one with First Quantum for an infraction of the free trade agreement between Panama and Canada. That one is currently suspended. And there's arbitration over Franco-Nevada for $5 million for infractions from their perspective of the free trade agreement with Canada. And there are 2 smaller ones as well, one from Comid and one with Lever, using the Korea Central America free trade agreements and France Panama free trade. So recently in the news, we've heard that there's a dialogue, some pressure between the Panamanian government and the company, where they're saying that the arbitration cannot be paused. And so the population wants better conditions for the country and wants the threats to be eliminated. So to put this in context, the annual budget of our whole country is 30. Okay, so even though the arbitration is paused, the other 3 arbitration cases, we have no news about them. And on the other hand, we know because of consultations we've done with experts in the area that this arbitration could easily be reactivated. And this was confirmed recently by the CEO of the company. So the threat to the Panamanian state from these arbitration processes is still there. However, I want to present the idea that the threats come from the company both within and outside of or independently of these arbitration cases. It's threatening the rule of law in our country because the corporation has systematically and sadly, with the help of our national authorities, has been undermining the power of the judicial system, taking advantage of the executive and the legislative branches of the government. And why do I say that? Well, of course, the best known is the ruling in 2023 that Paulina has described in her opening speech. And definitely that establishes the fact that the contract they gave to First Quantum in 2023 is illegal, unconstitutional. But this was a historic thing for the Panamanian people because there was a huge outcry that we've never seen, the kind we've never seen before in terms of defending human rights and the Constitution. And the court is saying, the Supreme Court says that the executive, through this mining concession, should uphold human rights and including the rights of boys and girls, children's rights. So they didn't just look at the rights of children, but also vulnerable communities that live in the areas surrounding the mining project. And the court said that they had to take into consideration the environmental and economic impact of the concession and the direct impacts on a segment of the population. In this case, rural populations, informal settlements of farmers and peasants who are facing serious impacts from this mining. And that they should have a voice in environmental decisions. And the court said that clearly that people have the right to a clean environment and that we need to safeguard human integrity and well-being by limiting the adoption of legal measures that would reduce environmental protections. I could continue citing many quotes from the ruling by the Supreme Court. And all this stuff is still in play today. And there's a campaign to make it seem like the ruling by the Supreme Court only applies to the last concession. But it's not true. The court's decision in its analysis is ruling on any mining activity and the need to protect vulnerable communities and children, the right to a healthy environment, the rights of nature too. Those things are in play in any scenario in which the mining could be reactivated. And so is any new concession would undermine all of those things, which the Supreme Court has defended. And so we're in a scenario now where the new president has announced that they won't bring this issue again to the Legislative Assembly, or that there won't be a new contract. And the people are saying that they need to uphold this moratorium. And they're looking for any way to reopen this project, going over the heads, ignoring these protections that the Supreme Court has defended. There have been 11 environmental sanctions on this company before, and they're just not making any progress on those. And it's because of the incessant use of resources by these corporations. So there have been lots of investigations, and there have been many instances of violations, infractions by the corporation. For example, lack of compliance with reforestation commitments by the project, and a series of new processes that went against the environmental instruments that exist. And so they're not respecting Panamanian laws, especially environmental laws. They're not respecting the power of the judicial branch of our government in terms of the checks and balances that we need to have. We need a definitive and a safe closure of the mine. Panama deserves that. And this mining concession is right in the middle of the Mesoamerican corridor. It's in a key area for biodiversity. A lot of studies have testified to the great biodiversity of the area. There's stuff here that is not found anywhere else in the world. And so it's really important to consider the great valuable of this nature for the world and for human beings. And they're trying to continue destroying the area. So civil society is making a lot of efforts to try to block this. One of these is a working group under the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So understanding the context that we're in, where there was an unprecedented outcry against the mine in the first place, and now they're trying to reopen it or reactivate it. We want to really translate the technical information from the government of Panama so that we can understand how to regulate and follow international standards. And they really haven't, the authorities haven't paid enough attention. And they haven't allowed organizations to participate and get access to information. And they're making a lot of decisions about the future of the mine, but without participation from civil society. And so we're gathering information to share with the public. And we're also taking legal actions to try to get access to information. And we're talking to the public about the implications of the mining. And we're happy to be collaborating with the Environmental Law Alliance and working with experts on mining at the international level. And we're analyzing recent reports by the company, as Viviana has said. And they're finding enough reason so that the Panamanian state should take rapid and resounding efforts to defend the safety of the people who live around the mine and the environment too. And so it's a grave threat of environmental collapse. And they're really not respecting international standards in terms of these types of facilities. And experts say that there is heavy metal leakage into the local area, and this really threatens the local communities and their health and the local environment too. Joanna, you have a minute left. Thank you. So in this sense, our technical working group is continuing to emphasize the importance of providing information about this to the public. And there have been lots of announcements and press conferences and interviews with authorities, but there's really no plan, there's no commitment from their side. In 2023 and 2024, there was a clear plan that was never followed through on. That included mechanisms of technical working groups with different actors from civil society, and attempts to replace mining development in our national development project, but all these things were never followed through on. And so we want to learn from the experience of the previous Supreme Court ruling. And we want to make sure that Panama is really listening to us, because there is a huge consensus among Panamanian society that we're better off without mining.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Thank you. That was very, very, very helpful, and I think it's going to set us up for a great discussion. So now we would like to hear from another key participant in the 2023 protests, and that is Warriors of the Sea. Carlos Cruz is an educator and teaches at a local high school. He's from Platanal, Costa Bajo, in the province of Colón. Colón is the province where First Quantum's copper mine is located. He's also a member of the popularly named Guerreros del Mar, or Warriors of the Sea. During the month of November 2023, this group maintained a blockade of the port used by First Quantum to access its copper mine and bring in supplies for its operations. The Guerreros del Mar represent many nearby communities who are angry over First Quantum's use of resources, land, and water, and the environmental impacts of its operations. So I see Carlos right now, and I feel that he definitely has the best office out of any of us here. So I really wish that I was there doing this webinar in person with you, Carlos. Carlos, you live and work close to the mine's port. And so we would really like to hear your thoughts about the announcement of the possible reopening of the mine and the latest comments by the government on a possible public-private partnership as a vehicle to reactivate the mine. I know that you have lots to say about this. And at the same time, I would like also to hear your thoughts about the stigmatization that some members of Guerreros del Mar have faced from government officials for speaking out against the mine. So take it away, Carlos, and thank you so much.
Okay. Buenas tardes ante todo y
Good
muchas gracias por la
afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak in this space. I'd like to share a bit with you of what we've been living through. And as was said, my name is Carlos Cruz. I am a teacher, and I'm from Platanal, which is near the mine, about 20, 25, 30 minutes away from the mine. First of all, I'll talk about the possible reactivation of the contract between Panama and the mining company. This would go against what the people have already been saying for more than a year. And people really went out to the streets to protest it. Our government has shown that it's incapable of defending our interests. And this situation really woke up a lot of patriotic fervor among the people because of the bad actions of the government and the corporation. And to think that they might reactivate that contract goes against everything. It goes against the Panamanian people. It goes against our constitution, as Joanna was saying. It goes against the ruling that was already issued by the Supreme Court, which was so important for the Panamanian people. And I think our president is not really following through with what the people need. And they say that the environment is essential for the future of our younger generations. And we should note that ever since the Supreme Court issued that ruling declaring the contract unconstitutional, they have continued to produce, or they've continued to try to operate. I think they're trying to influence public opinion in Panama to say that it brings jobs and etc. Because we know there's a problem with lack of employment and lack of economic opportunities in the region. But it's not just because the mine has closed. Donoso is a protected area. It's a special area where private extractive industries are not allowed to operate. The government isn't really promoting any alternative types of activities that are based on environmental protection. And they're trying to convince the people that the only way out of the problem we have is through mining. So the government is really complicit in allowing this corporation to come into the areas and give away free supplies and stuff, like in schools. And they're trying to get to our most sensitive sector, which is children, our most sensitive population. And we need everyone to know that continuing with the mining, it means death for our nature, for our communities, for human beings, for our rivers, which have been affected by the mining exploitation and all the changes that they are creating through their mining activities. It's just unreasonable. Now, on the other hand, the stigmatization that we've experienced the offensive by the government is sadly, it's not just the ministers, but also the government himself. They're trying to criminalize anyone who's not in agreement with their vision for the country, or anyone who goes against what they're trying to do. And they really don't know anything about the things, the work that we do, the sacrifices that we make to continue to be able to study and become professionals. The mining company's port, where we've done our protests, is a Celan station. And Celan is the entity that takes care of the coastal areas of our country. And it's less than a kilometer away. And we talked to them. It's impossible for us to be doing the types of things they're accusing us of. And if they have proof, they should show it. And the only way these companies are allowed to operate is when they have the complicit actions of the government. And we are a group that came out of the public protests. Our group includes a lot of peasants and local fishers and farmers, and we've come together from different communities to express our rejection of the mining activity. This company hasn't done anything for us, nothing positive. All they've done is contaminate and destroy. And we can see the lack of good schools, the lack of health centers in most communities. 1 minute left, Carlos. On Thursday, we talked to a young person who was struggling with their health. He was throwing up blood, and he had to wait until a helicopter was sent in because the roads were not passable. There is not direct access because of the mining. They restrict our movement. And so a lot of people don't know about this stuff, and the government is not admitting it. They don't want to solve these problems. So Donoso should really be backing environment types of economic activity that are not harmful to our communities. And they're taking advantage of some of our weaknesses, which are the lack of resources and the lack of opportunities and jobs in our areas. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Carlos. So just a reminder that people are welcome to post questions in the Q&A box. So we'll be happy to answer those questions right after our last speaker, which is actually Damaris Sanchez Zamudio. Damaris was born in Cerro Punta in the province of Chiriquí. She's a farmer and grows coffee, fruit trees, vegetables, ornamental and medicinal plants. She's one of the founders of the organization FANDICEP, or the Foundation for Integral Community Development and the Conservation of Ecosystems in Panama, where she manages and directs various environmental projects. She's also a water defender and has participated in many struggles to protect local rivers. She's a member of many other environmental organizations, such as the Panamanian Network in Defense of Water and the Latin American International Movement of People Affected by Dams. Damaris, a year ago, your organization published a report on violence and criminalization during and after the 2023 protests. Have any of those cases that we spoke about 1 year ago, we did a webinar to launch the report, have any of those cases been closed? Can you give us an update on those cases? I know that one of those people who were facing charges was you. Also, and specifically, we're here in Canada. This is a Canadian mining company. So my question to you is also, what has been the response by the Canadian government to the criminalization of protesters who were out in the streets to protest a Canadian mine? And also, we've been speaking, in this webinar about these discussions about a possible reopening of the mine. So I would like to know your thoughts about, criminalization and violence as, these plans are being discussed. And in that sense, what's the role of international solidarity? Thank you, Damaris.
Bueno, un gran saludo y voy a tratar de
Thank
ser
you.
un
Greetings,
poco
everybody. I have a bit of a cold. Maybe I'm not sounding great, but I'll try to be brief and I'll try to answer your question. Wanted to send my greetings to everyone who has joined the webinar and everyone who's listening today in different places around the world. Regarding violence and criminalization and different cases, well, the case of 21, the Tierra Alta 21, this was archived. This case was filed, and then Panama is not closing the case. It could be reopened. In my case, specifically, we had a legal advisor who allowed the presentation of different proof. We were able to get at least a temporary closure of my file. And so they demonstrated that there was not proof of what I was accused of. And my innocence hasn't been declared definitively, but that's what's gone on. And as you'll remember, this process, in terms of the Tierra Alta 21, it was led by a collective of tourism workers in Tierra Alta, and their president is currently working for the mining company communications department. There are other cases that are still open. For example, the case of Guerreros del Mar, one of the colleagues that has to report periodically to the authorities. And of course, there hasn't been proof of the charges. In terms of Canada, we presented our report in person and by email. We did get acknowledgement of receipt. We went with Carlos and other colleagues from the National Water Network to the Canadian Embassy, and they were attentive, but not open to really taking up our concerns. We asked at that visit and through written communication, we mentioned the fact that they are trying to criminalize the protesters, but we have not seen any work done to really protect the folks who are protesting or the nature defenders. However, Canada includes Canada has all these environmental regulations, and they want to protect human rights, but they're not doing this in our area. And as Joanna has said, the mining company continues having a presence, even though their contract was declared unconstitutional and they don't have a current legal process. Because, as we've explained, a lot of laws and rulings have prohibited their exploitation, but as we've heard, they're coming out to communities and schools and festivals to try to get their propaganda out about their company. We know people are very aware of the impacts of mining, but we're still worried that the company is using its communication outreach efforts to sort of mitigate the opposition by the Panamanian people to their operations in our territory. So in terms of the criminalization of environmental defenders and the possible reopening of the mine, we've seen that under the new government, he's also has links to mining interests. And the president ordered really intense repression, which of protesters, which resulted in injuries. And they have a policy of repressing protesters. And there are a lot of factors that are connected. The possible reopening of the mine, possible new laws, the situation of the Rio Indio, the Indio River, and the affected communities. And also ties with the United States. All this stuff generates a lot of complexity and the participation of a lot of actors too. And the response has been the deployment of police and security forces throughout the country. And they're avoiding road closures, but they're repressing peaceful protests using tear gas and other things to suppress these protesters. Workers have been arrested, and they've been identifying the leaders of the movements and trying to detain them. And they're really trying to intimidate social movements in our country. Damaris, 1 minute left. So the situation is quite complex and worrisome. Why do we have a presence of U.S. military forces in our country? They're very closely connected to our government. And international solidarity is very important for us. We've had historic struggles around our protection of our sovereignty. And we want to continue to defend our freedom to participate, our freedom of expression, and to not have mining imposed on our people. And with all the attempts at repression and generating fear among the population, we see the need for solidarity and the recognition that we're not a colony of the United States, we're not a mining territory, and that Panama is worth more without mining. Thank you.
Thank you, Damaris. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really hope that you get well soon. Thank you for joining us. I mean, you have such a horrible cold, and yet you decided to be here with us. So we really, really appreciate it. It was so important to hear from you. So before we move on to the Q&A session, we would like to share with all of you, a call to action. This is a call to action targeting, or it's for institutions and organizations. But everyone who's here is also very encouraged to support. We have listened today the demands and testimony from Joanna, from Carlos, from Damaris, who represent a whole movement in Panama for the defense of water. And so we want to be extremely clear to First Quantum Minerals today. Cobre Panama doesn't align with Panamanians' vision for their country and their economy. It is time for First Quantum Minerals to respect the decision by the Supreme Court, the National Mining Moratorium, and the demands for a definitive closure of the Cobre Panama mine. So we are inviting organizations and institutions to take action by signing on to an open letter that I'm gonna share right now in my screen. So if you can just bear with me 1 second. Let me see if I can share this here. Please, if someone can let me know that you're seeing my screen and the action.
Isabel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Joanna. So this is the institutional sign-on that has been drafted with local organizations. And so we want to reflect the ask that came out today. So we're going to be circulating this in the following weeks, and we're going to make sure that we deliver this letter to First Quantum Minerals. I just wanted to share this, and my colleague Paulina, I believe she's going to share this in the link, but also we're going to follow up and send this by email to those who register today. So now I'm just gonna, how can I stop sharing my screen? I'm so sorry. I'm not really good at sharing the screens. I'm still sharing my screen? I don't know.
No, you're not.
Okay, thank you so much. So now we have time for the Q&A. I know there's some questions in the box, and so let's go ahead with that. I see one here, and in the meantime, before we start, doing the Q&A session, I would like to encourage everyone else to continue to drop the questions there in the Q&A. And so there's one by Christopher Polon. That's nice. Thank you so much. We know you, and I know that Christopher has done a really great job writing about Cobre Panama and First Quantum in Panama. So he's got a question. And it says, Donald Trump has been outspoken about taking greater control over the Panama Canal. Has he mentioned Cobre Panama specifically to date? So his question is whether Donald Trump has brought up the Cobre Panama mine. I see Joanna. Go ahead, Joanna.
Yes. Gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you for the question. Donald Trump has not made a specific reference to Cobre Panama. Although the CEO of First Quantum said that he was going to try to get Trump's support for reopening the mine. And saying that he was going to try to get the United States interested in that mine as a source of copper. But Trump and his officials have not officially or publicly backed this project yet.
Thank you, Joanna. Damaris, Carlos, would you like to add something else?
As Joanna has said, there hasn't been a specific mention, but we know that the economic interests are always interwoven. And so we can't lose sight of what all has been going on and the US attempts to work its way into the canal and take possession. And we realize there's a threat always, but as we know, things have been quite confusing in Panama with the situations that are unfolding right now. I think that there have been lots of things that could possibly happen due to the social crisis that we are experiencing. It's not as bad as in 2023, but we think it could get that bad. So Damaris, I wanted to add, when the president of First Quantum made the announcement, there was a big reaction in the media and by the public and on social media too. There was a big reaction to the request to reopen. And a reminder that our national sovereignty is always in play in these types of maneuvers. We don't want to hand over this giant piece of land, 13,000 hectares, to the company. And they've often had access to photos and videos of what's going on in the territory. There's a lot of monitoring, a lot of vigilance. And so this sort of public sentiment came back to the surface after the declarations that by the president of the corporation. We know that the United States has a really strong agenda against the presence of China in strategic areas for the US. And we know that China has a lot of interest in First Quantum. So that's another factor to sort of consider in terms of the geopolitics of US influence over Panama. And if there's any support or approval of the United States, it would be strange considering the different decisions that have been made in terms of trying to work against the Chinese presence in the region. We can't ignore the possibility of US intervention. And as Joanna said, we have to factor in the US-China relationship. Minerals are a sort of a strategic resource. And we know that the US could have an interest in that. And they've said that there are American soldiers here. We realize that they could come out and repress the population during the protests. They have diplomatic immunity. And they could just flee the country after taking some action to repress. We're quite concerned about what's going on. As a teacher, I'm concerned. We've been repressed just for marching. We're not throwing anything at them, yet we've been violently repressed. It's quite concerning. We need to, of course, we need to remain calm, but we need to be aware Why is there so much repression by the government? We're not armed. And the teachers union has been involved in protests. I'm worried about the repression. And we need to raise the alarm about the excessive force and violence that our security forces are using against the protesters. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a lot of questions here. One question that has come up a lot, and I'm just gonna put it all together, is about as you some of you may know, we have a new government here in Canada that was is Justin Trudeau is gone. Now we have another one led by Mark Carney, and so some of the questions are related to either has the new Canadian government said anything about the situation with First Quantum? And then, if not, then what would be the message coming out of Panama to the new Canadian government, given the comments that the previous Minister of International Trade said back in 2023, right? As we remember, she said that pretty much it didn't matter what was happening in Panama, that the Canadian government was going to continue to support First Quantum Minerals. So, any message to the new Canadian government?
Comienzo yo. Ok, bueno, en efecto sí hemos entrado en contacto con la
We
Embajada de
have been
Canadá,
in
tanto
touch with the Canadian Embassy, as Damari said, bringing to them our report on human rights violations during the protests. When the ILO report is made public, this has information specifically about the collapse of the northern dam and about the acid leakage from the mine. So what we've been told is that the Canadian government said they would share the information that we gave them with the company. Panamanian civil society is hoping for a much stronger response by the Canadian government. And Canada is supposed to be a champion of the environment and human rights. So they shouldn't be violating human rights and destroying the environment here. They have commitments to protecting biodiversity and fighting against climate change. But those voices really are being lost in Panama, and not just only in Panama, but at the global level, because corporations aren't really in sync with the national commitments and declarations usually. We need better protections. We want the Canadian government to have a consistent focus on limiting the access of destructive corporations to our territories. And they need to address the human rights violations. And there need to be measures to remediate the situation. This is a good time for the Canadian government to come over
Thank
to
you.
our side and join our side, because they're considering reopening the mine.
Thank you so much, Joanna. So I just saw that Carlos.
Sorry, I forgot to say. In a news report in 2023, the CEO of First Quantum said that they were not in any position to pay taxes from the Canadian side. And the company is not paying taxes to the Canadian government.
Yeah, that's correct, Joanna, and that came out in a very powerful documentary by CTV, and we can definitely post the link so those who haven't watched the documentary can watch it on CTV about the historic protests in 2023 in Panama, where Tristan Pascal said exactly that the company wasn't paying taxes. I'm just seeing. I'm sorry. I know that Carlos Landamaris wanted to also respond to the question, but I see that Olmedo has joined us. So I just wanted to make sure that we can give him a few minutes to speak about the protests, and I know that he wants to share, a little bit about the current situation over there. So, Olmedo, we see you. What about? Can you hear us?
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Okay.
Yes, hello.
Sí, puedo iniciar.
Sí, te
Can I
escuchamos.
start talking? Yes, we hear you. First of all, greetings from Panama and the 19 de Julio Bridge. We're here at a national mobilization. It's an indefinite strike. Voces Ecológicas is the organization. It's an independent autonomous organization with with Radio Temblor, which is a popular communication outlet, a news outlet at the in the Latin American region. And so we see the same patterns and the same behaviors that go against what the majority of our country wants. They don't want citizen participation in terms of the extractivist projects. And through the international legal entities, we have made visible the violations of human rights and also the protests at a national level here in Panama. And on this very bridge, they repressed a lot of marchers, women, young people, indigenous people, and they have been scaling up their repression. And so they want to reopen the mine. And we are calling on our government and all of its institutions that are supposed to look out for the protections. They have to ensure a definitive and safe closure of this mine. We have been saying that it's apparent that biodiversity in the area of the mine should not be subjected to this type of destruction. And we don't want mining, we want a different kind of development. We need to avoid destruction and pollution and environmental harm, which is all linked to the mining. Law 125 of February has to do with the Escazú Agreement. But the government is ignoring this instrument, which under the Escazú Agreement, the population is supposed to have effective participation and information about activities that might harm our environment, but they're not following the Escazú agreement. One of our national demands is regarding the reopening of the mine, and the Panamanian people don't know how to really ensure compliance with the Escazú agreement. I'm in a bit of a tricky spot right now. As I understand, the indigenous peoples are coming down the mountain. And of course, we have expressed that what we want is participation, not repression. We want our participation to be respected. And also, we want the decisions of the majority to prevail. There's a lot of international attention to human rights issues. We still have some hope here in Panama for that reason.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olmedo, for joining us and making that effort. I think it was very important to hear from you as well. So we have a very only about 5 minutes or so, but I think we can finish with a last question. I'm just gonna join a few questions that we've gotten. So I'm just gonna say them, and maybe if one of you can give us like a very short answer and to the following ones. So one of the questions says, you spoke about the need to close in a definitive way the mine. And the question is, who will be responsible for paying for the closure of the mine? I think I know the answer, but I think Joanna will be great to answer that. Another questions that came in is related to, it says, we see that your organizations and communities have made a great effort to study and analyze the impacts of this mine and to disseminate all of this information. What does this tell us about the role of the Panamanian government and the company? That is, organizations who are actually doing the work of doing these independent studies about the mine. And then there's another question that I find very good, and it says, you guys mentioned that the company is engaged in a strong campaign across the country to promote itself as good for the Panamanian people, and that you're concerned that that they may be increasingly convincing folks in Panama. What strategies are you considering or thinking about to reach Panamanians in other regions of the country? So we're gonna try to answer the other questions in another time, follow up by email, but those are the questions that maybe if you can address in 1 or 2 minutes. Joana, Carlos, and Damaris, thank you.
Sobre el tema de los costos, hemos sido de la posición.
About the cost of closing the mine, we think that if the Panamanian government were to carry out sanctions against this company, there would be enough funding to responsibly close this project. Considering that the Panamanian law requires environmental impact studies, we think that the company should be responsible for the cost of that, and there should be financial assistance to close the mine if the company doesn't face up to its responsibilities. And so we want those mechanisms to be applied, and those are things that exist under Panamanian law already. We don't think that the Panamanian government should be left holding the bill for the costs of closing and cleaning up this project.
Thank you, Joanna. Damaris, Carlos, any last comments? Answer?
About the about the propaganda campaign by the company. Well, we have been creating different materials that we're distributing throughout the country through different men and women leaders in the communities. Here's an example of a publication that we put out. Joanna can share it, or Joanna knows it. And we're trying to bring this information to different spaces, like during the religious over Easter, the different religious processions that we did, we were out there participating and spreading the word. And there's a lot of material documenting and showing the negative impacts of this mining project. And we're showing the other side of the coin, right? The supposed economic benefits for folks who are out of work, and supposedly we need copper for the energy transition, etc. But we're trying to highlight the negatives. This is a country that's so diverse and so rich in biodiversity, and it just doesn't make sense here. We don't have the type of funding that Minera Panama has, but what we do have is the commitment of people in the communities and their sense of belonging and their desire to see a green Panama, one that's free of mining. And I think we're doing every effort in the communities. Carlos is doing it by visiting the territories and talking to people. And I think that that's really something essential that we are able to do. We need to do a lot of outreach so we can reach the largest number of people and with diverse types of sources, right? Because today kids are glued to their phones and stuff. And so we need to make sure that we're on the right channels. And we've got to continue using all the tools that are within our reach for this. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks for having us. As they've said, one of our vulnerabilities is our economic situation, which is so challenging here, but we want to look out for our future generations, for our kids and grandkids. And this area is so important, not just for Panama, but for the world. We want to take the time to make sure that we're reaching out to people and being able to explain how their lives are affected by this. We're bringing information out in different forms. We realize we have to use a lot of different types of media. And we want to encourage the community to not try to depend on this mine, to realize that there are alternatives. And like I said, the mining company is giving out backpacks and notebooks and stuff to kids in schools. They're trying to purchase public opinion. And that's just awful. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So I know there were many more questions. Thank you so much. I think this just shows the interest and the solidarity that folks here in Canada, but also in many other countries around the world, are paying attention to Panama and to your struggle. So we are definitely gonna follow up on those questions. And I think this is a great way to wrap up this webinar. We're gonna send you the information about all the speakers, the links to the action that we shared today. And I mean, thank you to all the organizations that endorsed this webinar, specifically to the Americas Policy Group, to Common Frontiers, and to Panama Vale Más Sin Minería. Panama is worth more without mining. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Paulina, to my colleague and co-facilitator, and to our comms team for supporting us behind the scenes. It was Pauline and me, but there were a whole team behind us supporting making sure that this works out well. So thank you to Val, to Mimi, to Claire, and of course to our interpreters, Megan and Maria, and to our amazing speakers, Joanna, Carlos, Damaris. Thank you so much for being there, for sharing your stories, and for all the work that you do to protect water and the environment. And so thank you so much. And so I think we're going to leave it there. Have a great day. Thank you.